underneath this marble bar, when it was in Pitt Street, was a very large cellar, which was exactly the same size as the bar on top. I would have come in here probably after I left school, which was in 1950. Well, I suppose like lots of people, you come in and think, wow, what an extraordinary place. As it was, and probably still is. It wasn't here, of course, it was in Pitt Street. And it became one of the notable cellars in Sydney because my uncle had it completely done up and renovated, and they used to entertain VIP guests and people down in the cellar. The entrance was from Pitt Street through quite a long marbled arcade that gave way into that last or that first section that you see now. There were 3 more sections beyond that which went straight out onto Pitt Street at ground level, and this was the saloon bar. In those days it was extraordinarily popular. This bar was always full, as all the bars were full, and the dining rooms were full because it held not only the supply of drinks for the whole of the hotel, which was reasonably large at that stage, but it also held quite an interesting collection of the copper measuring pots that they used to measure the quantities of liquor that were going through the establishment. And there was quite a display case of, Lord knows where that is now, somebody might have it, but it was quite a nice glass case with pots that ranged from quite large jewel pots to little tiny ones that measured a nip. And that was of great interest. But the floor was all painted and polished and clean, and that's the cellar in this bar. It was the first cellar in Sydney that I'm aware of, and I remember at the time, when it was the first establishment to put beer kegs in a row, because the beer flowed from one to the other, so it was only after this quite long line, I think it might have even got up to 12 kegs in a row. And it was something to do with stale beer or something. But it never got stale because it was pressurised from one end. And it flowed through from here to all the various taps in this bar. There was a separate cellar under the Pitt Street bar, and there was another cellar for George Street. George was my great-grand uncle. Well, I never knew George, of course, because George died in 1904. I didn't arrive till 1932. So I was never here as a resident. O'Brien bought it from a previous pub owner. And for many years it was O'Brien's pub. And George set up a little syndicate of people to bet on the races in what I think was the tin bar of O'Brien's pub. And he had expressed at the time some interest in owning the place. And a group of his friends got together and bought it for him in 1878. And it became then known as Tattersall's Hotel because George operated his sweepstake under the guideline rules of the Tattersall's Club in London. And it was known as Tattersall's, but it was O'Brien's pub. And eventually, at some stage, which I can't tell you exactly when it happened, it was changed to Adams Hotel. And from then on till it was sold, it was only known as Adams Hotel. My grandfather, who actually was George's right-hand man, he was W.J. Adams. My mother was the eldest of W.J.'s 4 children. George had no children from either of his 2 marriages. And W.J., William Joseph Adams, was the one who seemed to be prominent in that field. You've got to remember, we're talking about 100 years ago. And my mother was born in 1897, so she'd be 117 now. And she certainly lived here in the hotel for probably, again, about 110 years ago, because this also was, in the earlier days, George's home. George lived up in the first floor of O'Brien's pub. And that became his residence, and it later became some of the entertaining rooms of Adams Hotel. And eventually George bought another pub, I think it was Carter's or something, and that's where he built the Pitt Street Bar, which was the public bar in Pitt Street. Because later on he bought two other buildings. He bought one, the old Gowings building, and Adams Chambers, which is directly behind this section. And the hotel used 3 floors of that building as part of the hotel. There were bars and dining rooms and entertainment rooms over there. Well, people didn't have meals in pubs in those years. One came to have a drink. It's only in the latter years of my time that one started to get meals in pubs. You could go to the dining rooms in the hotels and have a meal, but it was easy to get into the dining room from here because there's a door over there in the corner, on this corner over there, which went directly into the foyer of the hotel, and immediately on the right of that was the entrance into the main stand and dining room of the hotel.